All right, 1 second here. Right, we'll go on to this Q&A. Again, want to welcome to this Q&A. Question came in that whatever comes up definitely does come up, but all good questions deserve to be repeated, even in context, or maybe not even in context. But the question was. Right. Someone here mentions, right, that link is the wrong time. So, but everyone still made it. So, yeah, it was a mistake, but that is the way it goes. So the question was somebody desperately wants have a conversion, and whatever. It's not uncommon. Definitely uncommon. They don't want to wait. They're frustrated. Whatever it is. And what they want to do essentially is go through reform conversion, right? Or conservative conversion, doesn't really matter, right? More or less, both groups are more or less the same, even if they started out even if they started out differently, right? Four movements, whole goal was to wipe out, to what do you call it? Uproot Torah. That was their goal, just to change it because they wanted to change it, wanted to, make it easier, whatever. Conservative movement started, really, they had Orthodox rabbis there, at least at the beginning, and they were still committed somewhat to the Jewish law. They wanted to make it more modern for the 20th century, and essentially went off the rails. And the difference between reform and conservative is not really that big. Well, back in the day, people would say, conservatives, let's say, 10 years behind reform. I don't even think it's that. They pretty much have similar agenda, or whatever. They do similar things. The difference is how they started out. But in either case, they're both heretical movements. But the question comes, I want to have this status already, right? I want to have this status. Okay, so it's gonna take me too long. Go through an Orthodox conversion. So what will some people do? Well, some people do. Not the fact that they started wrong, and then they realize, wow, this really isn't, really what I want, and then, they want to go through an Orthodox conversion, right? Not even talking about that. And it's a different issue, and that definitely happens. But let's say somebody decides, you know, this is the path they want to go. It's easier. I'll get an Orthodox conversion later, right? But they want something just to verify, you know, even on the right of return, they'll be able to come, right? They'll be able to come to the land of Israel, except they want to do anything, get married, and they have kids or whatever, they have to go through the chief rabbinate, that's for sure. And it is easier, I would say, if I'm going to reform a conservative conversion, it would be, a lot easier coming to Israel back on the law of return. And again, if you want to get married, do other things here, you have to, you'd have to have a proper conversion. So that question's come up. I'll be able to do that first. That question's come up also, a number of times that, some people say, well, it's a lot easier to get to Israel. right? My end goal is to get to Israel. I want to get to Israel the quickest way possible. So if I have one of these conversions, I'll be able to come back in the law of return, and then after that, I'll come, I'll get a proper conversion. Now, that's true. That is definitely true. It is easier, right? There's no question, and you won't be able to come back in the law of return. As we said, to do anything, in Israel when it comes to be, Jewish things, you have to go through the chief rabbinate. Okay, right? That is true, but nobody in their right mind is going to sanction to do it. Yeah, no, I got this question, whatever, a number of years ago. So before I answered the question, so I asked my Rabbi this question, and I said, what should I answer? Like, what's the answer over here? So he didn't really want to answer. So it's kind of like the irresistible force against the immovable object. So I kept pressing him and pressing him, and I said, well, I need to give someone an answer. Like, what should I say? So finally, finally he said, well, there are worse. There are much worse transgressions, to transgress. So I said, oh, you're saying it's permissible? He's like, no. He said, I didn't say that. He said, there are worse transgressions than that. Okay. But to sanction it? To say it's okay to do? Who's going to say that? Nobody's going to say that. Right? Nobody's going to say that. So that's okay. That's that question. Now, this question is, it's not about, coming to Israel. It's just, I want to have the status. I want to have the status of being a Jew. Now, we don't hold to the conversion, right? I don't know if Reform holds the conservative or conservative holds the Reform. Maybe they don't hold of each other. It doesn't matter. But we certainly don't hold of either one of them, right? The heretical movements doesn't matter. We don't hold of them. Conversion's not valid. But someone will say, I've heard this many, many times, many, many times. Not that they're already in the process. Not that, well, I want to finish it anyway. I've already paid for it. I had a discussion with somebody, and I said, but it's not worth the money. It's not worth the papers written on. But they couldn't get it out of their head. They paid for it. They said, but I already paid for it. So I was going around in circles. So finally I said, maybe just keep in mind, it's like you gave, money to a bad charity. Okay. You gave money to a bad charity. You move on, right? Wasted money happens, right? Happens. I've had people buy books that come to me. So I told them, you got to throw them away. Can't use them, right? So, wasted money. Sometimes person going to waste money till they, until they know what the truth is. Okay, it happens, right? It definitely happens. So the person couldn't get out of their head. So I said, I said very clear that why don't you just say it was wasted money and you move on? And the end result was I paid for it. So okay. So it didn't matter. They still want to do it. And what's the rationale? Not just the money. I mean, it's part of it. That's definitely part of it. But what's the rationale? The rationale is that it's certainly going to be a lot quicker, a lot easier than Orthodox conversion. Very good. That's true. You read a few books, you're done. Okay. Right? Maybe 6-month course. You don't learn very much. Okay. Yeah, you go conservative, read a few more books, also not worth very much. Very good. So it's easier. Okay. Now, even if it's easier, even if we'll come into Israel and come in on the law of return, even if it's easier, even if it's easier, and you want to have the status. Now, for some people, or maybe a lot of people, they just, they want to be done, quote unquote. They want to have the status. Maybe it'll take them a lot longer to get an Orthodox conversion. Fine. They want to have the status. They already had this conversion. Maybe it helps them get into communities better. I don't know, whatever the mentality is. But they know deep down it's a travesty mark of your sham. So if it's a travesty mark of your sham, why do it? Why do it? Now, a person wants a status. But if the status isn't worth anything, then it's not worth anything. Right? Now, what if a person has kids? Right? A person has kids. If a person has kids, you want the kids to be bar bat mitzvah. You want the kids to be bar mitzvah. It's an important thing. Okay. I would agree. It's an important thing. But you know this thing isn't real. So having a bar mitzvah, what does it do? Nothing. It doesn't really do anything. It gives them a certain status. But you know what? Well, what is the bar mitzvah in general? Right? Let's discuss that for a second. What does the bar mitzvah boy do? Usually, right? In Orthodox circles, we'll say. What does the bar mitzvah? I mean, even in conservative circles, they read from the Torah also. Let's say, okay, yeah, they normally read. They normally read the last aliyah in the that portion, that Torah portion, which is probably not very long. It's got to be at least 3 verses. So anywhere between, let's say, 10 verses, something like that. It's not going to be much longer than that. All right, it's relatively short. Right? Then after you make the second blessing, depending on the custom, people throw candies, which mazel tov, very good. So what happens? Right? So what happens after that? So what happens after that is they read the Haftarah, right? They read from the prophets. Very good. Right? So now that can be quite long. My youngest son's bar mitzvah partial was last week, so it's like 33 verses. That's a daunting task, but he spent months, someone going through it with them and making sure they know it well and all that. Very good. Some have longer, some have shorter. Okay, that's what people do. That in the Orthodox world, that's what people do. They call it the Torah. They read from the Torah. They read from the prophets. Very good. And then, they'll have a party. People come, wish mazel tov, they'll have a kiddush, whatever they do after that. Yeah, very good. Now, what if you didn't do that? What if a person never had a bar mitzvah? Does that mean for a boy, right? When does he come of age in order that he's obligated a mitzvah? It's the age of 13 and a day. Yeah. Let's say at the age of 17 he has a bar mitzvah. It's called to the Torah. Does that mean from 13 to 17 all his mitzvahs are nothing? He's still a kid? No. And obviously he's come of age. So there's a custom to call him to the Torah. Very good. And what if he didn't? What if he wasn't called to the Torah? Is he totally nullified? Is he a loser? Like what is it? What is it? It's a custom. Very good. I'm not here to make fun of customs. Not at all. Right? It is a custom. What they do in Europe back in the day, they did a similar thing, called to the Torah. What was the big party? After synagogue, they had a little bit of herring, a little bit of schmaltz. That was it. Maybe a little bit of kugel, if that. That was it. Now, people rent out halls and do other things. Right? It's a whole other thing. But in general, what happens if you're not called to the Torah? There are people that have bar mitzvah in their 50s. They never had a bar mitzvah before. So they have a bar mitzvah. Very good. Does that invalidate their Judaism in any which way? No. Does not invalidate. Now, in the Reform Conservative movement, or say in the Conservative movement, a girl also get called up to the Torah. So we don't do that. Right? We certainly don't do that. But she comes of age anyway, the age of 12 in a day. She's got all the obligations. Right? She's got to keep Shabbos, she's got to keep kosher. Right? She's got all the obligations that girls are obligated. Very good. Now, if she never had a bar mitzvah, quote unquote, doesn't mean you can't have a party with other women, girls, whatever, families. That's not a problem. That's not an issue. Yeah. So now you want to say, wow, she's not called to the Torah. Well, is she Jewish? I mean, is anyone really seriously going to call this into question? No one's going to call it into question. Right? But people say, well, I never had a bar mitzvah. Okay. Now, if someone never had a bar mitzvah, you can do it later. Like, there's nothing nullifying it. You can do it. Now, some people say, and this is the argument, but I want my kid to do it at the right time. I want him to do it at the right time. Okay, there is what to be said for that. But let's say, for whatever reason, you can't. It's not time to do it. Not ready, whatever it is. Right? Does that invalidate anything? No, doesn't invalidate anything. But there's an emotional issue. That's what it is. It's an emotional issue. And the emotional issue is that I want my kid to have his bar mitzvah. Okay. Now, to what extent To what extent are we going to go that far? Are we going to decide and say, listen, it's so crucial for my kid who's not Jewish at the moment to have a bar mitzvah that I'll jump through hoops, I'll do something bogus because it's not worth anything, it's not worth the paper it's written on, and then my kid will have a bar mitzvah and it'll be, and that'll be great. Why should he lose out? That's the argument. Right? That essentially is the argument. Now, if you don't believe, again, it's a personal issue. Right? It's a personal feeling. I get it. It's a strong personal feeling. But we can't lose sight of what reality is. Sometimes, let's say, you have a child comes of age, and let's say they're mentally challenged. They can't read from the Torah. Or maybe, it'll take them a long time to read from the Torah. Maybe they won't do it till they're 15. Maybe they won't do it till they're 17. I don't know. It depends how developed they are, mentally, let's say. So even someone who has these issues, and they didn't have the bar mitzvah at the right time, are they, if they can do everything like everyone else does, are they liable in all the mitzvahs? They obligated to keep all the mitzvahs. They're obligated. I mean, someone, obviously, Down syndrome, other things, they're going to be limited what they can do. So they're not going to be, they'll be limited in what their obligations are. But at that age, they're obligated. Very good. And then they get called to the Torah. What are they going to call the Torah through? What if someone, I don't know, got injured? They can't physically do it when they're 13. So what do you do? What do you do in such a case? Yeah, well, let's say, God forbid, they're in a bad car accident. Yeah, they can't. And their bar mitzvah is like, I don't know, a month later. Yeah, they're going to be real rehabilitation for 6 months, at least. Or more. See, so you do it after the fact. Or call them after the fact. Do it the next year, whatever. It's not something, and this is the point, it's not something that gets nullified because you didn't do it the right time. Right, there are mitzvahs, you didn't do it the right time. You didn't do it, okay. This is not one of the 613 commandments. Certainly not, it's a custom. It's, okay, custom we say is like Jewish law, very good. Very good. But, if you didn't do it, and you did it later, you got called up later, you have a kiddush for it, very good. Well, what's the problem? So the issue is, and this is what we can't get caught up in, and it happens, I guarantee it happens, because I've heard it in many other cases, and that is people get caught up with emotion, which is understandable. But even if you get caught up with emotion, you got to see what the reality is in front of you. Now, the reality is, so where's the emotion come in? The emotion comes in, I want my kid to have a bar mitzvah, but he's not Jewish yet. He's not, potentially may never be Jewish, or, it might take another year, might take more time, whatever it is, right? Let's say. That's the reality on the ground. So now, how are we going to circumvent it now? So that's the reality. Now, what does emotion say? What does emotion tell you? Emotion tells you, this is such an important thing, I want my kid to do it. I want him to do it for himself, not just for me. For himself. Okay. Yeah, plenty of emotion here. Now, if that's the case, and a person is totally emotional, which I do understand, not downplaying it in any way, shape, or form, at what point or at what level are you willing to, how far are you willing to go to do this? Because the reality is it's not going to be done now. It's not going to be done at the right time. Which really, in the bigger scheme of things, doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter. What if someone converts? Let's say better. Let's say someone converts. We'll get back to this other case in a second. Let's say someone converts. They have kids, right? And they have a son, 17. Yeah, well, he missed the 13-day deadline, right? 13-year-old in the day deadline. Now he's 17. So now you want to say, okay, 17, he finally converted, he never had a bar mitzvah. Well, that nullifies the conversion. Doesn't nullify the conversion by any stretch. You have bar mitzvah afterwards. What's the problem? You do it later. But you have this so back to our case, you have tremendous emotional strings here. Tremendous emotional strings. I get it. But if and again, this is where logic goes out the window. Because it's so emotional, you're forgetting what the most important thing is. And what's the most important thing? It's Torah. It's doing it right, as Kaufman would say. Kaufman's law. You do it right, you don't do it. Right? So now you want to say, okay, now you want to say, but it's so important to me, I'm even willing to do that. Does that make any sense? Logically. Right? So it's not a logical issue. It's an emotional issue. But when it comes to Torah in general, there are laws you got to keep. There are things you can't do. It's not about emotion, right? And in many ways, it could be by sending away the mother bird, right, and taking the eggs. What we call shluach haken. The only mitzvah in the Torah besides honoring parents, that Torah says you get long life. Long life means in the next world, not in this world, right? But a person may feel bad sending away the mother bird. They get very emotional about it. Okay, but they do it. Because at some point, whenever the mother bird's hovering over the eggs, at that right time, that's what you have to do. Can you feel pain for the mother bird? You can feel pain. It can be very emotional, very good, but that's the mitzvah, right? It's a divine decree. So the mitzvahs we got an obligation to do, even if emotionally it's very hard, right? I mentioned last week, what's the hardest mitzvah to do? My opinion. What's the hardest mitzvah to do? When you have an obligation to mourn for someone, mother, father, sister, brother, God forbid, a child or a spouse, and right before the burial, you got to make the blessing Diana Emet. Right? That blessing. Saying that God is the true judge. You are acknowledging, making a blessing, mentioning God's name. He's king of the world. He took this loved one from me. Doesn't matter how emotionally attached, not emotionally attached. This is a dead person you have an obligation to mourn for. Yeah, make it very simple. Very, very simple. So what happens? You have to make that blessing. Not only that, you're going to rip your shirt. It's part of the mourning process, right? You rip your shirt, whatever, and then the person's buried. It's a very hard blessing to make. It's a very emotional blessing. See, many people make it. Myself, I had to make it also. It's very emotional. Yeah? But guess what? Guess what? That's part of the mitzvah. That's part of the mitzvah of mourning. That's the obligation. Right? So like I feel like doing it. I don't feel like doing it. Right? It's too emotional for me to do. That's what's going to be done. Now, I'll just point one thing out. What are they doing? I don't even think they do anything in the reform movement, but what do they do in the conservative movement? Someone dies, they wear a ribbon. They wear like a black ribbon. They don't rip their shirt. They wear a black ribbon, right? In honor of the person that died, right? You do that. You wear that. They wear that for 7 days. I don't even think they do it for 7 days. Probably for 2 days, maybe in a day and a half. Not even sure. Not even sure what the custom by them is anymore. A day and a half, 2 days, right? So a person's gonna wear this ripped shirt for 7 days, not on Shabbos, right? The morning clothes get changed. That gets changed for Shabbos because you can't be mourning on Shabbos. So that gets changed. Very good. But then the rest of the day, let's say a person died on Thursday. So you got first day is Thursday, first day morning, second day is Friday. Comes right before sundown, right before Shabbos. What do? You get changed. Right? You got changed in the Shabbos clothes. Shabbos is the third day. Then you go back. I mean, you don't mourn, you don't do anything external mourning on Shabbos. So that's the third day. Then Sunday is the fourth day. Monday is fifth day. Tuesday, sixth day. Wednesday, seventh day. Right? So you have 7 days. Right? 7 days. But you go back and change after Shabbos into your mourning clothes because that's what you have to do. You can't, you have to, these are signs of mourning. Right? These are signs of mourning. Now, it's a very emotional thing. Very emotional thing. Like I said, I've been unfortunately to a lot of funerals. And to see that person make that blessing and their shirt's gonna get ripped. Whatever, whatever. Painful. Very hard to do. Right? It's a very hard blessing to make. I would say the hardest blessing to make. Hardest blessing to make. Yeah. It's not optional. Let's make that clear. It's not optional. That's what you have to do. Emotionally, it's very hard. Okay, granted, it's hard. No one's going to say it's not hard. Unless you absolutely hate the person, then it doesn't matter. But still, in general, it's going to be a hard blessing to me. If not the hardest blessing to me. Because again, you're acknowledging God's the one who did it. That's what you're acknowledging. So yeah, you're very emotional. It's true. Who wouldn't be emotional such a time? It's emotional. Okay. Well, bottom line, what's my obligation? Even if it's emotional, my obligation is I got to make the blessing and rip the shirt. That's my obligation. No ways around it. Or be an Orthodox Jew, that's what you do. Even non-Orthodox Jews do that. Everybody does it. Yeah? If you're Reform, you're not going to do it. If you're a conservative, you're not going to do it. Open Orthodoxy, I don't know what they do. Right? Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but not really Orthodox. But in any case, that's what you do. All right. You got to tell me it's so hard to do. It's so hard to do. Okay, but that's part of the mourning process. That's what we do. Now, that being said, even if it's very emotional, that's what you got to do. But here, what happens, or what can happen, I've heard this, multiple times, in different forms, but it comes out to the same thing, right? And that is their emotions overcome, their heart overcomes what the intellect doesn't want it to do. Meaning, the intellect really knows what the right thing to do is. What's the intellect? We've spoken about many times in the book of Leviticus and other classes. The intellect is the soul, right? The soul really knows what to do, right? It can get misguided, certainly by the heart. There's a mind-to-heart disconnect, as we always say, right? The hardest thing I would say is for the intellect to really know what to do in this generation. Most people don't know what to do, when it comes to Torah mitzvahs or whatever the case is. But the heart's telling you something else. So the evil inclination, based on emotion here. What's the evil inclination going to do? The evil inclination is going to make you feel real bad. It's going to make you feel really bad. This is what we really want. It's really not fair. My kid should have this. And even though I know the Torah is true, right? This is a disconnect. Even though I know the Torah is true, and this is the direction I'm going to go, I still want this to be done, even if it's not recognized, in all the 9 yards. There's a disconnect. Now, where's the disconnect come from? It comes from emotion. Makes perfect sense. We are very emotional people, right? In general. Men might be less emotional, whatever, but we are emotional. No question. Now, that being the case, how can someone say, and I do understand why, but how can someone say, I'm going to throw out the Torah, I'm going to trample on it, I'm going to spit on it, and I'm going to do other things because this is really what I want. Now, they don't necessarily believe in it, doesn't matter. What do I mean this is really what they want? This is what their heart wants. It's what the heart wants. What the heart wants isn't what Torah wants. Sometimes. Or maybe a lot of times. The heart will convince us of other things. But if you already know, and that's the question, if you already know, it's a travesty, a mockery of Shem, and you know it's not true, and you know it's not worth anything, why do it? A similar thing, in a certain way. The Gemara says, for women to learn Talmud's not good for them. For a lot of different reasons. That's not the topic here, but for a lot of different reasons. Now, there are women who, like to give and take, want to be more intellectually stimulated. Okay. Right? That I get. That has nothing to do with knowledge. per se, or intellect, right? If they have the tools to learn, they could learn, right? But there's always a question. There's always a question. Now, person wants to study. Person, a woman wants to study Talmud. Very good. Yeah, wants intellectual stimulation. I had someone, you know, I had someone that, they weren't doing it to be a feminist, this and that. Yeah. So I told them, like, just don't put it on your application, for conversion. But the Gemara says very clear, it's not good for them. It's not going to help them reach their potential, right? So then there's an obvious question. If you want to learn this, and that's what the Gemara says, why learn it? So yeah, okay, that statement has to be understood in its context. Very good, not taking it out of context. But the simple explanation is that this is a negative thing for women for a number of reasons. Anyway, it's not the point. I don't want to get sidetracked here, right? It's not good for them. It's not going to help them, in the bigger scheme of things. So then what's the question? So why learn it? If they're telling you, if the Gemara says it's not a good thing to do, why do you want to do it? Now you tell me it's not a feminist thing. I'm not doing it for that reason. Okay, but understand why it's not good before you start out on this path. Okay, so if you understand, and I'm not saying that's exactly the same thing, but the point is, if you understand this isn't good, and the education is bad, and everything behind it is bad, does the yearning of having the status, at least for a person's child, override the fact that it's not worth spit? Now, some people will say, yes. But logically, in the path that they're going, that makes no sense. Because they don't believe in that. They don't believe in that ideology. Right? They don't believe in that heresy. They don't want to go in that path. But why are they going to rely on it? Why are they going to rely on it? Because the most important thing is that this kid gets a bar mitzvah. The ends in this case justify the means. Now, we can ask a very simple question. A very, very simple question. And the simple question is Torah true or it's not true? Now, if you believe it's true, there are boundaries. There are parameters. Something that at best is a custom, and I'm not here to belittle customs, right? At best is a custom. You're willing to go through and hear garbage in order to do it, to justify the fact that this person should be called to Torah. Logically, it makes no sense. Yeah? It's an emotional issue. I get it. There are a lot of contradictions in this emotional issue. If you were to tell me, it's a mitzvah they want to do, because they want to have the status, and it's Torah obligation, and it's going to affect this, that, and the other thing. Maybe you do a little bit of a rush job so they can participate in this big thing. It's going to illuminate their soul in this. Okay, in theory, I could hear such a thing. In theory, right? But that also doesn't make sense in a lot of ways. But this is like a billionth, times smaller than that. Not even. But again, where's it coming from? Where's it coming from? It's coming from emotion. So why am I harping on this? I'm harping on this because Judaism is about action. Right? Judaism is about keeping mitzvahs. Now, you got to keep mitzvahs to the best of our ability. We want to be all fired up when we do mitzvahs. Whatever the mitzvah is, we want to learn about it. We want to understand it, to the best of our ability. Very good. So, we want to be into it. I get it. But at the same time, there are boundaries. There are limits. Even if I would agree, you can pick and choose and do whatever you want. The conservative movement says that Torah changes with time. Show me that it works. Show me I can pass it down to the next generation. Show me that 70% of all these people are dropping out that are not dropping out. Yeah? They got a problem. It doesn't work. Even if I would agree to these premises, which I don't. It doesn't work either way. Totally doesn't work. So in other words, person wants to expedite something that really is not worth very much. So they say, right, it's not worth very much. And I know it's not worth anything. It's not worth the paper it's written on. But I want this for my kid. So that means all logic goes out the window. All logic goes out the window. Because it's not true. It's heretical, right? But it's the status. Who cares about the status? People get caught. I just want to have the name. I just want to be a Jew. It's going to take me another year, another 2 years, this, that. But I want the status now. What does that tell me? What would that tell anyone? Well, they're impatient. Okay, that's one thing. Yeah. But what does that really say? That really says I don't care about what the Torah says. I don't care what the rabbis say. I want to do what I want to do. That's not Torah anymore. So that's the problem. It's Torah made up in my own mind. Torah made up in America, in Europe, and other places. But that's not what Torah is. There are boundaries. There are limits. Can't just do what I want when I want. Got to understand what I'm obligated to do. Got to understand, how far I can stretch the parameters. Okay. Right? That's a legitimate thing. I mean, sort of. How many buttons you're going to press, depending where you're holding. But the Torah is not a pretzel. The Torah is not Play-Doh. Not just like, feel like doing it, I don't feel like doing it, I'll cut corners here, cut corners there. Okay, the evil inclination takes us a lot of places. Very good. Takes us a lot of places. But there are limits. There are limits. Torah is not about, and nobody cares. God doesn't care what I think. Doesn't care what my Rebbe thinks. Doesn't care what his Rebbe thinks. Right? The Torah is absolute. It doesn't change. It absolutely doesn't change. Now, if that's true, then my opinion is irrelevant. I have to follow what the Torah says. I have to follow what the rabbis tell me. To the best of my ability. Now, does that mean, we're walking on air and feel like we can do anything and we're all inspired every second of every day? No. Does that mean we don't make mistakes? No. But you gotta work, right? Torah's all about work. We've spoken about that many times. Torah's all about putting your best foot forward. There's paybacks, reward and punishment. Very good. But I have to learn it. I have to live it. You know what? Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard. Someone who becomes religious, they understand. They understand their family probably not going to have a portion of the world to come. Or even, non-Jews that convert. What's going to happen when their families are Christians? They're in trouble. They are in trouble unless they repent. Now, isn't that a sad reality? It's a sad reality. Shouldn't we try and, at least for Jews, should we try and convince our fellow Jews why it's so important to keep Torah and mitzvahs? We should. Big mitzvah. Try and do outreach. Non-Jews don't have that obligation. If they want to, they can, but they don't have that obligation. But it's not painful knowing that they're in serious trouble. And that they're not going to care what you have to say. No matter what information you show them. They're just not going to care. So what do? You do whatever you can. If they want to drink the Kool-Aid, good. If they don't, it's their choice. How far do they have to go? That's a good question. Right? That's a big topic. That's a big question. How far exactly you have to go? But, I would say that, you have to do as much as you can. Try and bring Jews back. Try and bring family back. Whatever, try and do this as much as you can. They don't want to listen and this and that. Okay. Right? But they should be given at least the fair opportunity. at least to tap in. They don't want to tap in, okay, it's their choice. But at the end of the day, let's say they don't tap in. They have no interest in tapping in. They, eat, drink, and marry, lest tomorrow I die. That's the way they want to live their lives. Yeah, and they'll make fun of you and they'll say things. Okay, you do your best. It goes nowhere. What happens? They're in trouble, right? We certainly believe they're in trouble. Yes, but again, if we really care about them, let's say we do, we'll make it easy. Yeah, if we really care about them, and we care about their soul and what's going to happen to it, isn't that painful? It's painful. 100% it's painful. But at the end of the day, what can you do? Nothing to do. They're not going to listen. Gonna make things worse. You try and lead by example. They want to drink the Kool-Aid, fine. If not, if you've done what you can do, then you don't have any other obligation. Now, we may feel, well, they're not going to listen. Well, how do you really know? And this, so a person can try. Probably a waste of time, anyways. But you're showing that you care, not that not that you're trying to brainwash them. This, that. You're showing that you care. But if there's no one home, there's no one home, right? I don't have to go further than that because they're not interested. No, maybe send them something, this, that. You don't have to say propaganda never goes to waste. Okay. They're in certain situations, going to be hard for them to change anyway. True. Very, very true. But, there's still an obligation to try and reach them. If you can't reach them, you can't reach them. If you get someone else to reach them, good. Right? It's always better probably than someone else. But let's say other people can't reach them either. And, they die, let's say. They die, no repentance, no nothing. It's painful. It's certainly painful. But even though it's painful, what else can you do? What else can you do? It's painful. Some things in life are painful. Some things are unbearable. Some things feel like it's just impossible. Okay. But again, what's the bottom line? What's the bottom line? Is the Torah true or it's not true? See, sometimes, Judaism is all about action. It's all about what I do. Yeah. It's all about what I do. So, what I think does matter, right? For certain things. And we always want to try and control what we think to the best of our ability. Okay. Not so easy. But it gets a little bit hairy or dicey or whatever you want to call it, where emotion gets involved. Now, once emotion gets involved, then it skews sometimes the way we think. Then it could be in certain situations, we try and circumvent certain things in order to try and make everybody happy. Yeah, no one wants to be accused of breaking up family and and being anti this or anti that or whatever. But sometimes you have no choice. But people, if you're put in a certain situation, so it could be maybe there are leniencies. Maybe in general you would never rely on, but for the sake of family peace, maybe you could do it. Now you might not want to do it, and no one's going to give you any credit for it, and other things. True, right? But family peace is worth something. Definitely is worth something. But what do you do in a case? Let's say, in a case where there is nothing to do, right? There is no damage control. Damage got to be done. Period. And nothing to do. Nothing to do. Good example. Good example. A Jew has a sibling marrying a non-Jew. That Jew cannot go to the wedding. Can't go to the reception. Can't have anything to do with it. You represent Torah. You can't go to it. It has nothing to do with the non-Jewish person per se. It does, but it's not their fault. It's the Jew's fault. Now, can't family put a lot of pressure? Sure, they can put a lot of pressure. Yeah, but in this case, and there are many other cases, but in this case, are you allowed to go? You're not allowed to go. Is there any way around? Is there any possible way? And the answer is no. There's no possible way. Or even better, a non-Jew, a sibling getting married. Where are they getting married? Religious ceremony in a church. Big problem. Or God forbid death. And it's a church service. Big problem. Big problem. Yeah, if it's done somewhere else, it's not in the church, but still a service, again, it's still going to be a problem. Because the whole thing is idolatry. Yeah, the whole thing is idolatry. Now, you can say, but come on, it's a sibling, it's a parent. Yeah, I get it. But there are things you can't get around. But in these cases, there's no way around. If there's no way around, what are you supposed to do? Right? What are you supposed to do? Well, find some level of permissibility. There is none. Right? And the game's going into marriage. There is none. Period. There's nothing to do. Except how much you're going to get yelled at. Right? It's not even damage control. It's worse. But what can you do? It's Torah true. Torah is true. Does Torah say many times not to intermarry? Says many times. They want to say it's only for that generation, only when they got into the land. Just don't intermarry. Period. Don't intermarry. Yeah, single biggest problem I think today for the sake of the Jewish people. Okay. So there's nothing to do. People are going to yell at you. People are going to scream. People are going to make you feel bad. Right? A lot of Jewish guilt. Does that change anything in the Torah? Yes or no? Doesn't change anything. Right? If there's a way around it, and sometimes for certain things there are ways around it, but people don't want to do it. Yeah? This is what it represents and this, but you could get around it. Yeah, so then there's a whole question, should you do it? You shouldn't do it. Okay, it's another issue. It's a different issue. Here, there's no way around it. Torah cannot be turned into a pretzel. There's no way. There's nothing to do. Don't you think the person's going to be under a lot of pressure? Yes. Don't you think people ostracize them for it? Yes. They'll be made fun of, they'll be called archaic, they'll be called medieval, they'll probably be called a lot worse. Yes. Does that change anything? Doesn't change anything. You can say sticks or stone, sticks and stones. You can say, listen, it's nothing personal. Yeah, it's not going to work because again, this is where emotion comes in. Can't you find some permissibility? There is none. And if I be more modern, there also you shouldn't go. Yeah, it's across the board. Not just if you're ultra Orthodox. Now, maybe someone will tell me, well, I know that, there was more Orthodox there. Whatever, a sibling got married, they were at the wedding. How could they be at the wedding? Good question. Very good question. Yeah? My answer would be, go ask them. Go ask them what the permissibility is. See, I'm not going to answer for them. I have enough trouble answering for myself. Yeah? Ask them. Right? I told when I went to Shiva with, was more Orthodox. Yeah, went to his sister's wedding, said everyone knew I was there under protest. Right? She ain't married. I was like, how'd they know you were under protest? You were dancing the horror under protest. You were eating your kosher food under protest. But I understand. I'm not here to judge. Right? I'm sure the person got a lot of flack. Tremendous amount of flack. And family would have totally ostracized them. Who knows what? What could have been caused? Okay. I get it. Family pressure can be very strong. Very strong. But at the end of the day, what's the permissibility to go? Jewish person's best friend's getting married in the church. Yeah, best friend happens to be a non-Jew. Okay. Can he go into the church? No. Not allowed to go in the church. But I'm going to the party afterwards, a whole another issue. So what do you, it's got to explain. It's not something I'm able to do, whatever. I'm here for you, but I can't go. I can't go to that. Maybe I'll show up. The other thing, whatever, but I can't go. That thing's all the problem matter. I'm not saying not for a lot of reasons, but well, what are you supposed to do? if there's permissibility, there's a way around it, even even if you wouldn't necessarily hold by it in the bigger scheme of things, okay. But sometimes we can rely on leniencies for certain things. Okay. But what if you can't? What if there's no way to do it? That's right. So I always say in my case, it's only a question of how much damage you're gonna do. Because there is nothing else to do. There is nothing else to do. Then we can find a creative way for something. We came up with something for, a few things. It was more of a creative way. Can't believe it worked, but it did. Okay. It worked out. Guess what? Other things didn't work out. I got slaughtered. What are you supposed to do? There's nothing to do. The only question is how much you're going to yell at, scream at, and be told off. But okay, that's unfortunately that might be part of the process. Now, isn't that painful? Is there a lot of emotion involved? Yes. What are you supposed to do? Does that mean you throw Torah out the window because emotion's involved? Now, what would the evil inclination tell you to do? You're right. It's not it's really something you shouldn't go to. But they don't know anything anyway. Maybe just, show up, you're there, whatever. Find different ways. Or person just feels so bad because of all the flack they're getting and all the guilt, they do it anyway. Yeah, again, emotion plays a huge role here. But at the end of the day, in either case, did the Torah change? Did the ideals change? They didn't change. What changed? What changed is emotion and how it affected you. That's what changed. But the Torah doesn't change. So if the Torah doesn't change, now back to our case, if the Torah doesn't change, and it's a very emotional issue, but at the end of the day, the Torah doesn't change. So a person's going to be very careful. Very, very careful. And the reason is, I'm not going to say it's so easy to be a heretic. I mean, it is, depending on what it is. But being part of something heretical, totally heretical, there's nothing to talk about, right, with any of these movements, something being totally heretical because a person has this thing, they want their kid to be called up to the Torah. I get it. It's an emotional thing. It is an emotional thing. But the whole thing is heretical. We don't believe in heresy. We stay away from heresy. Right? So where does emotion override over here? It doesn't. But it plays a major factor. Right? It skews the way we think. Now a person can say, you know what, I'm so fed up. My conversion's taking too long and this and that. Or I had someone say, where they live, they made it so hard, so they had a conservative conversion. They wanted to have an Orthodox conversion. Very good. That's what they wanted. But they made it so hard and this and that. They said, you know what? I'm not jumping through hoops. I'm going to go through a conservative conversion. They made it too hard. So I asked this person, okay, if we make it so hard and conversion so hard, what should we take away? What should we take away? Kashrus? Family purity laws? Shabbos? Blessings? I mean, what should we take away? Make it easier. What should we take away? So it doesn't change. You'll say, but it doesn't have to be that hard. I'm not saying it has to take 5 years. Doesn't have to. Person lives in the community, they have the knowledge, take 2 years. It shouldn't take more than that. Sometimes it can take less. Okay. Person meets the criteria, they should be able to convert. Very good. Let's see, this is the problem. People get fed up. People have a lot of aggravation. They don't want to stay, non-Jewish for so long. I get it. But the Torah doesn't change. And it's not about, I just want it to be easier. That either you're going to convert And you're going to do it right, or you're not going to do it. Can someone break? Yes. Someone can break from all this. I get it. It just, it just rides on the emotions too much. Okay. It can happen. But a person has to be strong as fire no matter what. And a person also has to realize, you know, what is it that a person wants so bad? And some people say, I just want the status. I'll do whatever it takes to get the status, even if it's not the right status. Even if it takes me longer to get the right status. I just want the status, but it's not status. Maybe it's status, go to the land of Israel. Okay, but we don't hold it status. And if it's something that, whether a person's called to the Torah or not, really, it doesn't matter. It's really a moot point. It's an emotional thing. Okay. But it's a moot point. Because if they're called to Torah at the age of 20, or the age of 50, or younger, yeah, they still have the obligations to be a Jew at the age of 13, 100%. Right? If they're Jewish. They still have the obligation. That doesn't change. But the fact that they didn't get called up to the Torah, so who cares? I had someone, talking, like my parents' generation. Like someone said, I didn't even go to Hebrew school. That's probably not necessarily a bad thing. Most people have negative experiences to it. Or someone say, I never had a bat mitzvah. Well, it doesn't matter. I'm not saying just because the person's a woman. Right? And if a guy never had a bar mitzvah, and they're not Jewish anymore, they lost their status. So what's the whole issue? What's the whole issue? It's an emotional issue. Okay. Aren't there many things that are painful in what we do? Yeah. So what's the breaking point? So I can't answer. I can't answer what's the breaking point. Some people, it could be more, it could be less. We take a lot. Converts take a lot. There's no question about it. No question about it. Maybe they take way too much. Could be. Could very well be. But keep in mind one thing. Certainly, converts given the Jewish people a bad name throughout the millennium. Many, many ways. Many ways. So the conversion process is not going to be easy. And it shouldn't be easy. Because we want the cream of the crop. We want people who are going to be the real deal. We want people that are not gonna, they're not going to what's the word? They're not going to crumble under pressure. Now they might crumble under pressure also. Okay. Are they going to go forward, or are they going to give up? You got to be very, very strong. Moving to a community, very hard. Especially with persons by themselves. It's hard. You got to integrate. You got to speak to people and go out of your comfort zone. I get it, right? It's not easy. Not easy by any stretch. But nothing ever that's easy is worthwhile. I read a book, I forget what it's called, that somebody, whatever, went through conversion. They started reform. They thought it wasn't for them, said, I just had to read, a few books, whatever. Then they got the conservative, read a few more books, and they said, well, this can't be real. Eventually, got them to an Orthodox conversion. It wasted a lot of time also. Okay. But, they had issues. Wasn't easy. It wasn't supposed to be easy. And it's not supposed to be easy. Right? Now someone says, well, you made it so hard. People drop out and they say, okay, so drop out. You want it easy. That's what the Torah's not supposed to be easy. I don't see anywhere where the Torah says it's supposed to be easy. Right? We do say, okay, you got to serve, King David says you got to serve God with great joy. That's true. We say you got so many laws and it's so hard. Plenty of joy. There is plenty of joy. You got to realize it's a double-edged sword. It's also payback. It's also plenty of things, you got to control what I say, what I do. You got to try and control your mind. It's hard. It's not supposed to be easy. I was telling someone yesterday, a person wants to, convert to Christianity. It's very easy. Believe in JC, put a little bit of water on you, you're good. So I said, you know what happens when you put water on you, right? You get wet. So it means you get wet. Okay. Yeah, person wants something easy. That's the easiest way to go. Maybe there are other easier religions. You believe in him, no responsibility. Again, I would sell it by the millions if it would really be true. If it really be true, yeah. Obviously, we don't believe it's true, right? But there's a lot of pain along the way. It's a lot of difficulty. It's a lot of hardship. Okay, you want fantasy? You want the real world? You want to be the real deal. Fantasy sells, definitely sells. It's a lot easier. 100%, it's a lot easier. For us, it's going to be a lot of ups and downs. A lot of ups and downs. Like every second of every day, I got to be aware what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, where I'm going. And when I pray, when I make blessing, I'm like, yeah, it's a lot to do. It's a heck of a lot to do. It's a heck of a lot of responsibility. I tell people you don't want responsibility. It's fine. Further keep the no-hide laws, not a problem. I keep you busy if I would live to the next 250 years. Plenty more to learn. Plenty more to learn. Tell me, community is not so much, religious things to do. And okay, that's true. Right? That means it's not valid. That doesn't mean it's not deep either. There's plenty more to learn. Plenty more to learn. It's already not going to learn it, keep as many mitzvahs as Jews. Okay. But there's plenty more to learn, either way. Yeah. But, it is an easier way. Many things I would say that a non-Jew has a moral imperative to do is an obligation. We have the obligations, all the obligations. Shouldn't a non-Jew dress modestly? Yes. Shouldn't they not speak badly against others? Yes. Shouldn't they do other things? Yes. Obligation? No. Not an obligation. I would say it's a moral imperative. I think it's good for them. It's good for people around them. I don't think there's any question. But not an obligation. We have those obligations. And you know what? They're not easy obligations. They're not easy. Controlling what we think. Controlling what we say, even better. Or in 30 prohibitions in one shot when you speak badly against someone else, even if it's true. Right? And you're not, and you're not allowed to say it. Either everybody knows it, even better. There are conditions. Can't just say what I want. My mouth isn't hefker. Right? It's not ownerless. Gemara in Ksuvas at the beginning says, that's why you have teeth, why you have a tongue. So before you say it, it's got to go through certain channels. But guess what? It comes out pretty quick anyway. But actually, I can almost stop a person. Or why do you have soft tissue on your ear over here so you can close it when people speak Lashon Hara? It's not the only reason you have soft tissue, but so the Gemara brings down. It's one thing. Okay. Are these laws easy to hold by? No. They're not easy. But I still have an obligation. Doesn't matter. Still absolutely have an obligation. To keep them. Whether it's easy or not. So what are we showing God beyond the shadow of a doubt? We're showing him that we're going to do it no matter what. And you look at all the punishments. Right? I hear this all the time from these trolls, Isaiah 53, look, suffering servant, and look at all the Jews be punished this way, that way, the other way, because they didn't do what we're supposed to do. Okay, that's true. Doesn't change anything. Doesn't change anything. It's true. And the prophets out there screaming, if you don't do it, what God says, God's going to destroy the temple, Jeremiah, the whole piece about that. People didn't like Jeremiah too much. Tried to kill him in different ways. Kind of hard to be a prophet. Jews don't want to get muster. They don't want to hear, ethics. Makes sense. Totally makes sense. But again, we got to be better. But that doesn't change anything. Right? That's a mistake the Christians make. It doesn't, he came fulfilled it. What did he fulfill? He didn't fulfill anything. But in general, in general, it's a much harder life. True. Much greater responsibility. And we see that if we don't do what we're supposed to do, there are many curses. 100%. Many curses. And unfortunately, the curses come to fruition. Horrific curses. Somebody asks, I got to go to a funeral home. Now, funeral home probably is not a problem. Right? Probably not a problem, not a religious service going on. What if it's a funeral? What if it's a funeral parlor though that has crosses all over? So difference of opinion. Someone just told me this, about idolatry. and it's because someone wears the cross, not idolatry. Well, we don't hold that way. It's not necessarily true. And the reason is there are two opinions. There are two opinions whether crosses were actually worshipped. I'm not even talking about guys, hanging on a stick, hanging up there. Yeah, yeah. A cross itself. Let's say you didn't have the guy, let's say there's a cross there. So you say, okay, maybe, if they didn't worship it, you can't go there. Or if they have no signs, let's say there's nothing there, it's just a funeral parlor. So, that's not a problem. What if they do a service, a graveyard service, let's say. Let's say do a graveyard service. Okay. So you're not in the church. Very good. But what if it's a church service? That's a problem. That for sure is a problem. Right? Hey, stand outside, not really listen, but yeah, going to church is definitely a problem. If there's if it's nothing going on in the funeral home or the funeral parlor, yeah. So what that shouldn't be a problem. Should definitely not be an issue. Question would be, you walked into a funeral parlor, and there are, statues, all kinds of other things around there. So that might be a problem. I mean, even if they don't worship there, might be a problem. Because of all these idolatrous things there. I would say probably a little more lenient if it's not a place to worship. Not a place to worship, and they have these things, might be less of a problem. Right? It should be less of a problem. What if a person's in a Catholic hospital? Let's say. Let's say I had to go to the hospital. There's a great rabbi that was in the hospital once, and he was in a Catholic hospital. So they had crosses in or they had him hanging there in every room. So what did he do? He took like one of the bed sheets and covered him up. So they come in and they're like, what's going on? It's like, well, I'm half dressed. I'm like, I'm half naked. Wouldn't it be an embarrassment to be dressed this way and your God's hanging out there like, looking over there. I don't know if you got away with it 100%, but it's a good way to cover them up, right? But again, if you're in a place, you won't be able to do that, right? If it's a place they worship, yeah, that would be a problem. If it's a place that has statues or whatever, um, or graven images that are worshipped, right? You're not allowed to make graven images, that's true, but graven images in general that are used for worship, that's a problem. That's a problem because someone took me to task on this, and in the book of Kings, where it talks about the building of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, they had cherubs, they showed little fat kids, and and other artistry that were graven images, right? The question is, how could you have graven images? So graven images are forbidden. They're only forbidden in general if they're worshipped. Now they show little fat kids these cherubs that aren't worshipped. These other things are not worshipped, right? It's for decoration. So it's a decoration. We don't have a problem, right? We don't have a problem. There is an issue with things in the heavenly sphere, the sun, the moon, whatever, drawing things according, more than one dimension, drawing them or sculpting would be a problem. But something in more than one dimension that it looks like these heavenly things, sun, the moon, the stars, and anything in the heavenly court. Yeah, so that's a different issue. That's a different issue. That's a different issue. Yeah, that's not about pagan images per se. That's a separate prohibition. And that prohibition is anything in the heavenly sphere is not allowed to draw. Right? At least in more than one dimension. So I remember a lion's on God's heavenly throne. It's one of the sides on God's heavenly throne. Right? So I saw a tapestry which is more than one dimension. And a lion on a tapestry on a parochus covering the ark. Right? A tapestry, a cover, covering the ark, where the Torah scrolls inside. So how is that permissible? So, whatever, there was a synagogue in a place I used to live that had this tapestry. It's a beautiful tapestry, but had a lion on it. So the first thing my Rabbi said is, how do you know it's a lion? He said, maybe you don't know what a lion is. I was like, I think, it's like, I was in South Africa, I saw a lion. Like, I know what a lion is. I said, I'm pretty sure I know what a lion is. So I told him, when I was on Shabbos, I told him, after the service, I want you to look at this. I just want you to tell me why it's permissible. Yeah. So I brought him over. And I said, tell me why this is permissible. He looked at it once, looked at it a second time, he says, yes, not a problem. I said, why not? He said, you're right, it's a lion. Right? He says, you know what a lion is? I'm like, okay, very good, thank you very much. Take that as a compliment. Yeah, but take a look at the lion itself. He said, take a look at the paw. Doesn't have all the toes. Doesn't have all the toes of a regular lion. Yeah. I only have two. That's it usually has four or three or whatever. It was missing one. So that's not drawn according to scale like a regular line. So he said that's permissible. As long as you did it in a way that it's not fully a lion, right? Take out one of its legs, I don't know. But here, what they did is in the foot and the paw, they took off one of the toes. So that made it okay. Why? Because it's not like a regular lion. Or at least I got a compliment. I got a compliment. It's like, well, you know what a lion is. I was like, okay. Thank you very much. I know what a lion is. Whatever, it's just very funny. Anyway, that would be, but that's a different issue. Why is that a different issue? Because again, things in the heavenly sphere and things on God's heavenly throne cannot be drawn according to scale normally or sculpted. Yeah, or sculpted. Right? Or made in more than one dimension. Whether it's painted in more than one dimension, whether it's woven, let's say, or whether it's a tapestry, I don't know, whatever it is, as long as it's not more than one dimension, right? If it's more than one dimension, or even if it's drawn, let's say, a kid wants to draw a picture of the sun, I can draw a picture of the sun. So if you draw it in a way that's not exactly like the sun, it's okay. Yeah. So I had this question. I had a tapestry. It wasn't a big tapestry, but I had a tapestry of the sun going down by the Western Wall. Now the sun was orange. Yeah. But you could tell it was the sun. But it was a tapestry. If the sun was yellow, nothing to talk about. Yeah, it would be forbidden. But it was orange. Yeah. So the question was, is it recognizable as the sun? Right? So if you get razor brain, you see a picture of the sun, very good, it's got a smiley face, that's different, that's fine. Even in more than one dimension. Right? Because not really a picture of the sun. Right? You're not really depicting the sun. But if it looks like the sun, right? And seemingly more than one dimension, it'd be more problematic. So good. So you asked what to do with the tapestry? Garbage. I throw it away. I had a picture. I was on Masada once when the sun came out. There's a certain place you stand on Masada. If you put your hand out like this, if you can see my hand here, you hold out the palm of your hand. You take the picture. It looks exactly like the sun is in your hand. Yeah. Guess what? That was a picture of the sun. It's a good picture also, but it's a better picture because I don't, I had a Bugs Bunny T-shirt on at the time, right? Looney Tunes. So very good. So I had my Looney Tunes shirt on, T-shirt on with that, the picture of the sun, right? Great picture. Garbage, same thing. Right? It's more than one, a picture you can't have, right? So, when you learn these things, I remember this is all Tractate of What Zohar talks about this. Well, it's in Rosh Hashanah also. So a few places. But when you learn it, if you learn it well, this is how it comes out. There was a question. I'll just mention one other thing. There was a question. Someone, I guess, was a sculptor. Someone asked for Moshe Feinstein, a blessed memory, Torah giant in America, or in everybody would have been Torah giant anywhere. A blessed memory that they were commissioned to build a bust of JFK, and he asked them if he's allowed to build it, if he's allowed to do it. Because a human in more than one dimension, you can't build. You can't sculpt. Can't weave. Right? Unless it's not full body. If it's not full body, then that's okay. because I have a picture of my Aunt May. Should be well. Looks like it looks like a rabbi with with hair. It's funny. I make the joke that I mean, whatever. It's not a joke, but the hair that's used for his beard, these, whatever they took from their dogs. I always say, if you touch it, it barks, right? Obviously, it doesn't, but any case, it's more than one dimension. So it looks like he's reading from a book, which is part of my wedding invitation. So that's also permissible. Why is it permissible? Even though it's more than one dimension, because it's not a full person. So that was his answer. Ramosh Feinstein answered that it's only forbidden if it be a full person, right? A full person would be forbidden, right? So since it was only a bust of his face or his head, that's okay. If he would have done, if he would have been commissioned to do, let's say, the whole body, that would have been forbidden. But since it's only part of the body, meaning just the head, then there's permissibility for that. I mean, not permissibility; it is permissible to do such a thing. Yeah. Let me see. Let me see. Are there any other? Yeah. Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna stop here. I just every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 o'clock Eastern Time, 5 o'clock Israel Time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Chaim Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, Orthodox Conversion Judaism.com, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos on Q&As, ethics of our fathers, book of Leviticus. You want to send me an email, Rabbi Chaim Kaufman at gmail.com, RBBICHAIMCOFFMAN at gmail.com.